Hello and welcome to another video lesson with Mr. Roman. Today our lesson is titled Factoring Quadratics or Trinomials where a equals 1. And so here's kind of the big idea that we're going to be working with. So here we have a product of binomials, so x plus 4 times x minus 2. And when we multiply or we distribute these, we get a trinomial in simplified expression of x squared plus 2x minus 8. So we've already learned that lesson going from this to this. Now we're going to be working backwards. We're going to start with the trinomial and we're going to move upwards, which we call factoring or dividing, and we're going to get a product of binomials. So a couple things to review here. So factored form is an expression written as a product of factors. So here in this blue expression, we see there are two factors, a binomial x plus 4 times another binomial x minus 2, so two factors. Here, there are also two factors in the green, a monomial, so 3x, and then times a binomial, which is 4y minus 7. And then here in red, we have two factors as well, a binomial, 2x minus 6, and then a trinomial, 5x squared minus 9x plus 8. And then the verb factor means to that you're trying to get an expression into factored form. So that's really what we're going to be doing. So when we see the word factor, think of that as a verb of getting the expression into factored form. So next we need to give a definition of what a quadratic trinomial is. So quadratic trinomials are where you have three terms here. It's the highest exponent of 2. So you can see the x squared there. And we're labeling a, b, and c as real numbers, okay? And then our sum product, we would say the factors of AC must add up to B. And as we're going to take a closer look at here, that we're going to call that X marks the spot. So here's kind of an overview of the process that we're going to be following. So number one, we're going to look to factor out any GCFs first. So GCF stands for greatest common factor. Number two, we're going to look to create an X marks the spot using this formula, a squared or ax squared plus bx plus c. We're going to take a times c, and that's going to be at the top of the X marks the spot. And then we're going to have b at the bottom. And then we're going to find two factors of whatever AC's product is that both multiply to this and add to b. Thirdly, we're going to split the b term. And then lastly, we're going to factor by grouping. And so the prerequisite skills for this lesson would be factoring out a GCF and then factor by grouping. So if you're not familiar with those two lessons, please go back and review those. So let's start with this trinomial. We're going to factor it. It's x squared plus 9x plus 20. Here's what we're going to be looking to get it to. So this is factored form, remember. There's two factors, a binomial x plus 4 and a binomial x plus 5. So that's what we want to get it to. But how do we get there? So again, we're going to start with the GCF. So first, look at all the terms, and we can see that there's a GCF here of 1. So we're going to say that this is prime between all three factors. Next, we're going to use our X marks the spot, and we're going to take a times c here using this formula. So a is 1, b is 9, c is 20. And we're going to say that a times c is 1 times 20, which is just 20. And that's going to go at the top of our X marks the spot. And then we find that b is equal to 9, so b is going to go at the bottom. And remember, we're looking to find factors of 20 that add up to 9. So those factors in this case would be 4 times 5, which do equal 20, and then add up to 9. Then step 3, we're going to split the b term. So the b term would be the 9x here. And we're going to split that into 4x and 5x. And then the other stuff from this expression, the x squared and the 20, those are just going to follow along in our expression. Okay, so now we see that we have 4 terms, and then this is step 4 where we're going to factor by grouping. So we take the first two terms, factor out the GCF of x. That's going to leave us with x plus 4. And then we find the GCF of the last two terms, which is going to be 5, and that leaves us with x plus 4 in the parentheses. And then continuing with factor by grouping, we see that we have a common binomial here of x plus 4. So we factor that out. That's what I've shown here in purple. And then we're left in the second binomial here, the second set of parentheses with the leftovers. And the leftovers would be x and plus 5. So we're going to put that in the second parentheses as the leftovers. And then now we can see that that, again, is in factored form. So we just successfully went from the trinomial here to a product of binomials in factored form. Now, let's review that process again. So first we started with looking to factor out the GCF. Then we created X marks the spot using A times C at the top, B at the bottom, and those come from this formula here. We split the B term, and then we factored by grouping. So let's go ahead and look at an example where we're going to use the GCF to start with. And let's use this example here. So here, factor the trinomial completely. So again, we're looking to get it into factored form. But here we notice that the GCF of all three terms is x. So we're going to go ahead and factor that out. So x on the outside, and then inside we still have a trinomial, x squared plus 3x minus 54. Well, this trinomial we can still factor further into a product of binomials. So now we're going to look at step 2, which would be making our x marks the spot. So we're going to start with a times c, which is 1 times negative 54, and that's going to equal negative 54, and that's at the top of our x. Then we're going to look at b, which is 3, and that's going to put us at the bottom of the x. And then we're looking for the factors of negative 54 that add up to 3, which in this case would be negative 6 and positive 9. Okay. Then in step 2, so we have this expression, this trinomial with the x on the outside. We're going to split up the b term of 3x into 9x and negative 6x. So that's what we're going to see next. 9x and negative 6x here in the middle. And then you can see the x squared just came down and the negative 54 just came down. And then this x on the outside just followed us as well. Next, we're going to factor by grouping. So the first two terms here, they have a GCF of x. So we factor out the x, and that's going to be x plus 9 in the parentheses. And then the last two terms, they have a GCF of negative 6. So when we factor out that negative 6, again, we're going to be left with x plus 9. So now we have a common binomial, x plus 9, that we can factor out. And again, notice how the x here on the outside, that GCF is still following us downward. The common binomial x plus 9. And then in this second binomial, the second set of parentheses, we're going to put the leftovers of x and negative 6. So x minus 6 in the second parentheses. And now we can see that this expression is in factored form. Now this expression in factored form has 3 factors. It has x, a binomial of x plus 9, and then another binomial of x minus 6. And there are other examples in your notes, but this should give you just enough information. So that concludes our video lesson.